Is atheism a Christian heresy? Well, that's what at least one person seems to think. Maybe two. The crazy here isn't self-contained. Since there are atheists around the world who have never been Christians, I don't really see how that's defensible, but I guess we'll have to see. I have a feeling the dumb is going to be strong with this one. Here comes a channel called the 401st Prophet. I mean, that almost sounds like a legion of stormtroopers, doesn't it? Sadly, this guy's about as clueless as they come, and in this two-part video, we're going to see exactly why. He's pushing another apologist, Tom Holland. No, not that Tom Holland. That Tom Holland at least has some talent. So, is atheism actually a Christian heresy, or are these people just out of their minds? Stay tuned and find out, I guess.
Some time ago, I published a video, Atheism's Biggest Problem. It got more comments than any video I have ever posted.
That's not necessarily a good thing. Now, granted, I didn't see that video. If somebody wants me to go back and take a look at it, just let me know down in the comments and we'll see. But right now, I want to see how this one goes before I commit to taking on something else. Most of the religious videos that pretend that atheism has a problem, mostly that problem is, but we don't like it. Well, so what? What you like doesn't actually mean anything, and it's usually the emotions of the religious idiots that are getting in the way of any actual truth. So I guess keep that in mind that he has another video, probably a lot of them, but don't post anything unless you're really impressed with what he does here. Therefore, onward.
Recently in a British journal, the eminent historian Tom Holland wrote an essay entitled Humanism as a Christian Heresy.
Which is not going to go well, although we're not addressing that article, I'm sure. He might bring up elements of it later on, at which point I will respond, but I don't want to take this too far off track if I don't have to. Now, granted, the title of this video is Atheism is a Christian Heresy, which I think you will already understand is ludicrous on its face, but I guess we'll get there when we get there. No need to jump the gun.
Since humanism is officially atheistic, I changed the title a bit, and now I want to give some of Holland's arguments that atheism is a Christian heresy.
Except that's not actually going to go anywhere. Here's the problem. Atheism vastly predates Christianity. Someone posted down in the comments on this video, and I'll throw it up on screen for you, that at best, if you count all the Hebrew mythology, Christianity only goes back about 4,000 years. The earliest trace of human worship goes back 150,000 years, and if we're going to be honest about it, modern humans have been around at least 200,000 years. That means that for atheism to have been a Christian heresy, it would have had to have only come about in the last couple thousand years, which is absolutely ludicrous. Atheism is the default position. Absolutely nobody pops out of the womb believing in a God. Therefore, he's wrong. Tom Holland is wrong, and he can just go back to playing Spider-Man. And no, it's not the same guy. Of course, this dude doesn't know anything about atheism, but I'll just let you hear it out of the horse's mouth.
According to Holland, for the past several centuries, Western intellectuals have argued that there is nothing special about human beings.
And there isn't. We have known for a very, very, very long time that humans are just another species of animals that just happen to live on this planet. There are certainly things about us that are different, just like there are things about other species that are different. But that doesn't make us special. The religious, however, they get off on the idea that we're just magically delicious or whatever, because they have a lot of vested interest in thinking that we are. But that doesn't make it so, though. Lots of religions have tried to put humanity on a pedestal. It isn't just Christianity. So I guess we'll have to see how he justifies what's certain to come next. Let's see.
We are simply one more creature evolved from primitive life. Add astronomy to evolutionary theory, and man is diminished even more. Holland says, quote, set against the icy immensities of space? What is humanity then but the merest speck of dust?
Yep. Oh, I get that makes a lot of people sad, but your fifis don't actually mean anything. This is an immediate red flag, or at least it should be, when people try to frame factual reality in emotional terms. That's something the religious do quite often, if you notice. But they aren't actually concerned with what reality shows. They just really want to be happy. But happiness doesn't actually mean anything. If you're trying to get to the truth, then relying on base emotionalism is a quick way to get off track, and that's why the religious, of which Holland absolutely is, go so entirely wrong. They are not trying to reach demonstrable reality like we are. They just really want to believe.
What scope is left us as a species to claim any dignity at all?
This isn't about dignity, it's about truth. Truth matters, and your childish fifis do not. This is why just about any discussion with a theist will almost immediately turn to emotion. Don't you really want to believe, though? No, not really. I really have no interest in that, unless said belief can be justified by objective fact. It might be really comforting to say, well, I really wish I could flap my arms and fly. But that is not rationally defensible. So who cares what you wish was the case? I only care what is actually the case. And this is true of religion as well. I don't care if you wish there was a God. I care if a God actually exists. If a God exists and can be demonstrated to exist with verifiable evidence, then I will believe that that God is real. If not, I won't. My feelings don't remotely enter into it, and if yours do, then you're doing intelligence wrong. Knock it off.
Virtually every intellectual in the Western world believes in naturalistic evolution and man's tiny place in the universe.
We don't have to believe in it like we all just came to the conclusion because it made us happy. We accept it because that's where every single shred of evidence that we have actually points. We don't get there because we like it. We get there because it's defensible, because the evidence that we have at hand shows it to be true. That's the difference between us and you. We care about the truth. You do not. And I think that's a problem on your side.
And yet, contradicting all this, quote, in an age that has seen the theory of evolution almost universally accepted, and the limits of our knowledge of the universe pushed to ever more incredible extremes, there seems to have been no diminution in the value that we as a culture ascribe to human life.
There's a big difference between the value that we ascribe to a thing and the value that thing actually has. I mean, we can look at the Mona Lisa, for example. What is the Mona Lisa made of? Well, nothing particularly useful, yet a lot of people seem to think that it's invaluable. This is just a subjective assessment. Subjective assessments don't mean anything. I mean, I just got my new puppy, and she's laying here right next to me. And yes, she's still doing fine for anybody who's curious. Now, she's just a dog. She's one of millions and millions and millions of dogs out there, and lots of people have them. I see them every single day. She's going to live maybe 12 to 15 years, and then she's going to die. Yet I value her existence, completely subjectively, her current existence anyhow, a great deal. Nobody else would, any more than I would really value their dogs or their cats or whatever they have, because dogs aren't inherently special. And guess what? People aren't special either. I wouldn't give a damn if this prophet guy just dropped dead right now on screen. I have no attachment to him whatsoever. Now, I might feel bad for his family, but it's really no skin off my ass if he just flops over and dies. He is not special to me. He might be special to somebody else, but I really have no reason to care. An estimated 150,000 people die every single day worldwide, and I don't care about the vast majority of any of them. Do you? I bet you don't. People are just not special. Get over yourself.
On the contrary, that human rights are universal, that all men and women have value and dignity, that the poor, the disabled, the elderly, and everyone else are deserving of human compassion, is something believed in passionately and with emotion by virtually every intellectual in the Western world and by virtually everyone else.
And that is all entirely subjective. It doesn't matter how many people believe a thing. It matters only if that thing is factually true. I am not interested in your fee-fees. Sure, I agree that all people within my particular social structure should have the same rights. That's one of the foundations of my culture. However, that doesn't mean that I think for 1 second that people living in China or Russia or the Middle East have the same thing. We made all these rights up. That's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. Rights don't exist without people to make them up. You can go ahead and cry now, but that's just the truth. Rights are not inherent. They are invented. The idea that everyone has equal rights everywhere around the world, that's relatively recent. I mean, ask the slaves 150 years ago how equal they felt. Today, of course, we say, well, that was terrible. But back then, that was completely normal. It's something that people need to be able to get through their heads. Our ideas change over time. Get over it. In another 150 years, people from the future are probably going to look back at us and say, well, the stuff they were doing back then, that was terrible. Because that's how these things actually work. Get over it. Your feelings don't matter.
Holland goes on to say, quote, that we are all of us possessed of certain fundamental rights simply by virtue of being human.
And he's wrong. Sorry, I know that I broke in here in the middle of a sentence and all, but it's important to understand that Holland is talking emotionally, not rationally. There are no rights except those that we make. It doesn't matter if you like the fact, it remains a fact regardless. And I think this is where a lot of discussions with the overly emotional break down. They want to live in a world that coddles their egos. The fact is that they don't, but that doesn't seem to matter to them, does it? When in doubt, make something up. How do you have a reasonable conversation with anybody who's going to do that?
And of dignity that embraces our entire species, are doctrines so widely accepted that many of us barely recognize them as doctrines at all.
That sounds an awful lot like a you problem to me. I acknowledge a reality as it actually seems to be. I follow the evidence to its logical conclusion without regard for how it might make me feel. I am not important, and neither are you. In another 50 years, I'll be dead. Probably less than that, but another 50 years at the outside. All of the highfalutin moral grandstanding that I might have done in my life, if I had been a religious imbecile like these morons are, that won't mean a damn thing. I'll just be rotting in the ground, and that's just the way it goes. Hopefully, the people who come after me, they're smarter than I was. And if not, it really doesn't matter much because I won't be here.
In 2002, the World Humanist Association issued the defining statement of world humanism.
Which I don't really care about because I'm not a humanist. And the reason I'm not a humanist, and I've actually done a video on this, which I'll link in the description below, is because I think a lot of humanists are far too concerned with, but I just want to be happy, just like the religious are. They are not concerned with the actual state of the objective world. Now, it's one thing to say that you think that humanity should be treated well. I mean, I agree with that. Humanity should be treated well. It's another to just put us up on a pedestal and pretend that we're special, because that's just dumb. One day, our species is going to go extinct, just like every other species that has ever lived anywhere or will ever live anywhere. Nobody is going to miss us. Nobody is going to care. Learn to deal with reality. You might not look so dumb if you do.
It proclaimed the worth, dignity, and autonomy of the individual and the right of every human being to the greatest possible freedom compatible with the rights of others.
Okay, but that's just an emotional statement that doesn't actually mean anything. It's self-serving. If you believe that everybody is special, you are pushing for them to reciprocate. Well, if I let you have rights, then you have to let me have rights. And that's why just declaring that people have things that don't actually exist in practice, while it might be a fine ideal, it doesn't actually mean anything. Yeah, let's go tell those gay people that they're special while they're being thrown off of the roof by Muslims. Let's tell those children that they're special while they're being molested by Catholic priests. Telling people that they're special, that doesn't make them special, and it certainly doesn't make them free from abuse. Tell that to the atheists who are regularly murdered in places like Bangladesh. I'm sure their dismembered and beheaded corpses feel really, really special, don't you?
The humanists argued that they had arrived at this statement by a process of reason and observation, but that's ridiculous.
And it is. They arrived there the same way that the religious do. Wishful thinking and emotions on overdrive. They just really want it to be true. Now, granted, there might be some utility in proclaiming a thing as a means to push for additional acceptance. That doesn't make the proclamations true, it just makes the lies not so difficult to swallow. Just because most people believe the lie, that doesn't stop it from being a lie. A useful lie never becomes the truth. Believing stupid things because it makes you feel really good, that doesn't make it true either. This is the problem with being overly emotional. You don't tend to be really concerned about the facts. You really just want to believe.
It is a religious dogma that requires faith.
To some degree, yes. I mean, it's not religious because words actually have meanings, but it does require that they believe things without any evidence to say that any of it is true. In that, I will agree that it isn't necessarily a good idea. This is why we have laws that enshrine that equality on a social level, without pretending that said laws make it objectively so. People might go their entire lives believing the speed limit is 65 miles an hour. I mean, you'd have to be an old fart like me to remember back when it used to be 55. That doesn't mean, just because you have no experience otherwise, that it's some kind of holy writ. We just made it up, just like most everything else. Deal.
Virtually all humanists live in Western culture and are products of that very Christian culture. So, they claim to believe in naturalistic evolution. They hold passionately to a value that is clearly contradictory.
Welcome to the wonderful world of compartmentalization. This is what happens in religion all the time. Pretty much all Christians do exactly that. The things that they profess to believe, those are not defensible in the real world. They can't be consistent because otherwise they just wouldn't survive. They can believe things like Matthew 6, where it says that God will take care of you, but then they have jobs and they work their asses off and provide for themselves. Or Matthew 17:20 through 21, where it says that the faithful can move mountains. But you don't see any of them putting that to the test, do you? So they just compartmentalize, and most people do it. The things that work day to day go over here, and the other stuff, well, it goes way over there. Yet he isn't providing any examples of atheists doing that, is he? He's just pretending. So let's see if he comes up with anything worthwhile.
How can they ascribe so much worth to people when philosophically they believe there is nothing special about human beings?
Because it's not objective worth. As I said before, I can really care about my dog. I mean, I care about all of my dogs. There's nothing special about them, objectively speaking, but subjectively, I happen to think they're pretty great. I would do anything to take care of them. So this happened maybe 2 or 3 weeks after I got my latest dog. She wound up getting 2 foxtails stuck up her backside. Her whole back end swelled up like a balloon, and this was Friday night, just after the regular vet had closed, so we took her to an emergency vet, and it wound up costing us $1,000 to have them removed. The whole operation took less than 15 minutes, and then she was on anti-inflammatories and antibiotics and all that kind of stuff for a while. That, plus regular vet visits to have the drains removed and all that stuff, this is becoming a very, very, very expensive dog. Yet the second that they said, well, this is going to cost you $1,000, I said, do it. Do what it takes. The money is no object at all. Take care of her. Hell, I've done this with animals that I just found. I mean, many years ago now, there was this big boxer mix that we came across, and we were going to find a home for it. Days later, and I mean days later, he came down with parvo. And this is back when parvo was a majority killer. So off to the vet he goes, and hundreds of dollars later, he came home, and we just turned around and found him a good home. And we didn't charge the new people a penny. The value of that dog was really zero to me, but I still did what I had to do in order to bring him back to health. Everything was completely subjective. That's kind of how it works. So that's where we're going to stop for the day, just because this is getting pretty long. I estimate it would probably be about 45 minutes long all told if I just let it play through, and I really don't want to do that. This guy just isn't worth it. I will be putting this out eventually as a supercut, so you can just watch it straight through if you really want to, if you're really that crazy. Remember, let me know which things you want supercuts of, and I'll try to release them on a Saturday once I get around to it. Some people seem really enthusiastic about it, something about listening to it on road trips, that kind of thing. So if that's something you want to see, let me know. I'm flexible. Anyway, until next time, please don't be this guy. I mean, don't be any of them, but people like this and Daniel King and Mike Winger and, all right, the list goes on and on and on. But these people are just embarrassing. They really are. The fact that they keep doing it says an awful lot about their level of intelligence or lack thereof. I trust you are all smarter than that. This is a cautionary tale. These people need a lot of help. So anyway, until next week, take care. I don't even know what "is atheism a Christian heresy" even means. Although, from the way that a lot of Christians talk, everything is Christian in some way, even if it's not. And that's because they've wrapped their entire lives around their ridiculous religions. Taking a crap is somehow Christian, if you don't think about it too much. And thinking about things is not something they really have to worry about because clearly the religious haven't done a whole lot of that. And today is just one more example. Big surprise there. Welcome back to part 2 of "Is Atheism a Christian Heresy?" A claim made by the 401st Prophet. Oh, and Tom Holland, you can't forget about him. I mean, not Spider-Man, some religious dipshit philosopher. Anyhow, as we saw last time, he has absolutely no clue what he's talking about, which is pretty understandable because most Christians have no clue what the hell they're doing. They just really want to believe. So we're going to pick up exactly where we left off, probably in the middle of a concept, but the supercut will come along sooner or later and you can just watch the whole thing in one sitting. If you're crazy. But I'm not going to judge. So let's get back to the action.
People accidentally arose from the primordial soup.
Because that's what we want to believe. Because we have a vested interest, not only in our own survival, but the survival of those around us. Now, I find that the religious don't understand any of this. They don't understand a whole lot. They just have giant theological goggles on, and they can't imagine life without them. Yet, humans are an inherently communal species. We need other humans to survive. Therefore, we go out of our way, at least try, within our local communities, to take care of each other because we need them to make it through the day. I mean, sure, on a global scale that becomes a lot less necessary, but it is baked into our DNA. And I'm sure that this guy has to understand that, but he's trying so hard to push a theological narrative that he has taken all leave of his rational senses. And again, no surprise there.
From soup they arose, and to soup they shall return. And why should they be considered any more valuable than soup? Still, humanists and atheists believe in the uniqueness of human beings. Why? because their values are produced whole cloth from their Christian heritage.
Bullshit. In fact, modern Christianity largely comes from secular sources and secular values. And that's really always been the case. If you go back to the very earliest days of Christianity, a lot of the concepts came right out of Greek and Roman mythology. It came from Egypt. It came from a lot of different places. Most of this stuff the Christians didn't come up with. But that's a little bit off topic, so we'll skip it for now. It's why the number of fundagelical assholes is going down. I mean, just look at the Baptists. Their membership is plummeting, down almost 500,000 members in just 2022 alone. That is the largest single-year numerical drop in more than a century. All of Christianity is falling apart. But the crazies who are trying to maintain their fundamentalist faith, they're dropping like a stone. And before you say, well, that was just a fluke, because I'm sure there's going to be some Christians who will try that, the Southern Baptist Convention has been dropping by about 100,000 people a year since about 2010. This is not a healthy religion. It's just not.
Today's atheists try to argue that their view of the worth of humanity can be found in ancient cultures, particularly Greece and Rome, but they can't. It is exclusively the result of Christianity.
Which is all just a lie, and they're very good at that. Now, I don't have to go back to the previously mentioned Greece and Rome to find value in humanity. I don't really know that humanity as a whole has much value. But I figure we ought to keep the smartest and most rational of us around because that's really the only way forward. Otherwise, you get this dumb shit who is supremely convinced that he's got all the answers when he's just wrong by every demonstrable metric. This is just Dunning-Kruger syndrome on display.
Today's atheists speak with utmost contempt of the book of Genesis, particularly the creation account. But that's where their view of humanity originates.
Except it's not. This is just, well, I know more about you than you know about yourself. No, these are just claims that come up from his backside because he really wants it to be true. No actual atheist input required. Whatever would we do without these theistic imbeciles telling us what we really think? He is talking to himself and to others that think the way that he does. Atheists have not been consulted.
Genesis 1:27 says that man was made in God's image and therefore has infinite worth and value.
I don't care what it says in your stupid book of make-believe. Now, granted, we know that absolutely none of this is being made for atheists. That's true of pretty much all of these religious videos. It's being made by dumb people who aren't at all concerned whether any of it is true or not, for dumb people who just really want to believe. We have not been consulted, but they don't really care about that, do they?
And that's what today's atheists believe.
I really don't think you have any clue at all what atheism is, what atheists think, or what atheists believe. This is the problem that we see all the time with the religious. They aren't talking to us. They're talking about us. They have no clue what we really think because they've never bothered to ask us. They only say what they think we ought to be thinking based on their own particular theology. We are just boogeymen in their heads. In fact, just a couple of minutes ago as I write this, another theist popped up and said, well, I just wanted to sin. Great, where the hell did you get that? Especially in light of the very long discussion where I said that sin wasn't even a thing if there wasn't a God. It has nothing at all to do with me. It has to do with whether or not your imaginary friend is real. Yeah, mostly I think they're just having conversations with themselves because they sure the hell aren't talking to us and they sure the hell aren't listening.
And that's why they believe it. And no one has ever believed it unless they were at some point exposed to this doctrine.
We could probably just fast forward to the end and not miss anything, which sadly is usually true with most theist videos. They just aren't saying anything intelligent. They're just spouting religious jargon because it gets them where they want to go. But that doesn't actually mean anything to the non-God-soaked. It's why they think they get to tell us what we think, because clearly they know us better than we know ourselves. At least that's what they'd like to think is so. It's really too bad it's all bullshit, right?
Holland finishes by saying, quote, "To live in a Western country is to live in a society that for centuries, and in many cases millennia, has been utterly transformed by Christian concepts and assumptions."
Yeah, no. That is simply not true. In fact, most Western cultures today are about as far from Christianity as you can get. Of course, the religious just don't like that fact, so like so much of what they do, they just look for anything that they can remotely relate to and declare, "Well, God done it," or "my religion done it." That's pretty much the same thing. The reality, though, is that it's been Western culture that has largely influenced Christianity over the centuries. It's why so many Christian churches have had to modify their theology and try to explain why the things that they embrace today, well, it just doesn't quite match up with what's actually in the Bible. They did that for survival. They were losing members, and maybe if they just appealed to gay people or something like that, maybe somebody would come and sit in the pews and give them some money. It's not that hard to understand, unless you're religious.
So profound has been the impact of Christianity on the development of Western civilization that it has come to be hidden from view.
Except it's not. Not really. Most of the things that Christianity has influenced over the years stopped mattering decades or centuries ago. And I know that these people really want to feel special, but they're really not. Mostly, Christianity, and this goes for a lot of religions, but mostly it's just a relic. It's a holdover that's just waiting for its increasingly elderly believers to drop dead and go away. Very, very few young people, comparatively, buy into Christianity or just about any other religion, especially in the Western world. They just look at you people funny, as most of us do. You people are out of your ever-loving minds. Who here is surprised?
Modern atheists do not derive their views from careful reasoning and the application of science. They derive them from medieval theology based on the Bible.
No, not even close. Of course, you have to remember that this jackass has never actually asked any atheist where they get their ideas. He just assumes that it's true because that's what he wants to believe. But that doesn't make any of it true. This is pretty much the case across the religious world. They are all saying things that personally appeal to them on an emotional level, because they don't really care if any of it is actually so. But you just want to sin. No, you're just an idiot. We don't believe that sin exists. We don't believe your God exists. Just because it says so in your big book of stupid stories, that doesn't mean anything. If you just asked us before you open your mouth, maybe you wouldn't look like such a moron. But you didn't do that, did you? And this is why these people look so stupid. Because they are.
The founding document of the United Nations has what they call the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
And I don't give a shit what it says. I mean, I'm going to let him get to his point before I completely tear it apart, but I personally put pretty much zero faith in the UN at all. I don't think it's done a whole lot of good, do you? But I guess we should let him get back to it and make a fool of himself some more.
But they are not universal at all. They are Western, and specifically Christian.
No, they are absolutely, positively, most definitely not. So let's take a quick look, because I don't think any of it is going to work out well for this doofus. Article 1 says, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Well, the Bible says everyone's born a sinner and can never do any good without God. It specifically sets these groups at odds. You're either with us or against us. Now, I agree, universal human rights are complete bullshit, but that's because there's no such thing as universal rights. Try going into most countries in the Middle East and telling them they have to provide universal human rights. They're just going to laugh at you just before they hack your head off. So Article 2, so we're just going to go through a couple of these, says, everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Again, that is not remotely universal, and it never will be. That's the thing. These are not realistic expectations. And this is certainly not biblical. The Bible is very, very clear that if you're not part of their particular religious club, you're going to hell. And that's certainly not equality, is it? In fact, the Bible is also very clear throughout that women, they don't have equal rights, and the Bible was demonstrably used in support of chattel slavery and other things like that. So, bullshit. One more. Article 3 says, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Well, that's not even remotely true. That's just something that makes people feel good inside. But that is not how reality works. Again, we just have to go back to the Bible, which not only endorses slavery, but in the New Testament, Paul says for slaves to be obedient to their masters. So much for liberty and security of person, right? Now, there is another 27 articles that we could go through, but we're not going to because that would be really, really, really boring. But even if we did, this dipstick would completely lose. So I don't know who the other 400 prophets were, but I figure they had to be smarter than this asshole.
And every member of the Western elite believes they should be applied to every culture on earth.
Well, I'm not elite, not by any stretch of the imagination, but even I don't think for 1 second that's realistic. That is never going to happen. It's an ideal maybe, but that is never going to happen in reality. It's kind of like Christians who think they're going to convert the whole world to Christianity. Yeah, how's that working out for you? Especially given that the first world is rejecting your stupid religion wholesale.
In other words, our atheistic elite believe in spreading a specifically Christian doctrine to every member of the human race.
Which is demonstrably untrue, as I already showed. These are people without the slightest grasp on reality. These are people who do not read or understand the Bible. These are people who are, Christians in name only, because that's most of them. They don't understand any of the stuff they're supposed to believe. They just remember some of the stuff that comes down from the pulpit on Sunday morning and then pretend that makes them experts. Surely you've talked to these people too. People who will tell you all kinds of tall tales about things in their big book of multiple choice that aren't actually there. If you ask them for chapter and verse, they don't know because they've never read the thing. They think there was actually an apple in the Garden of Eden. There wasn't. They think that a whale swallowed Jonah. That's not true. It says a great fish. Mike Ditka, you remember him? He claimed that the scripture said, well, this too shall pass, when he got fired by the Chicago Bears. But that's not true either. It does not appear even once. And of course, one of the most famous, that the Bible says that God works in mysterious ways. No, it doesn't. That does not appear anywhere. The closest you can get is Isaiah 55, 8 through 9, which says God's ways are different than our ways. These people don't know what the hell they're saying. But they sure aren't shy in saying it, are they?
My, what aggressive missionaries they are. Holland concludes by asking where all this is heading. Quote, it is hardly surprising, of course, in a society that has increasingly abandoned the institutional practice of Christianity, yet still clings to its assumptions, its values, its myths, that we should shrink from staring the implications of our current predicament fully in the face. End quote.
Except, as I showed, that is demonstrably not true. None of this has anything at all to do with Christianity. This is just reading into things that aren't actually there. And that happens a lot if you notice, because the religious, they don't tend to be that smart. They kick and they scream and throw temper tantrums when they don't get their way, and then they pretend it's all done under the umbrella of their religion. Except they don't really know anything about their own religion, do they? It's all just crap they made up in their heads, and then they said, well, I vaguely remember seeing it somewhere. Yeah, doesn't exist. Then they act like they've got some kind of universal truth that doesn't demonstrably exist. Because they're morons. What else is new?
Then Holland speculates, was Nietzsche right when he said, when one gives up the Christian faith, one pulls the right to Christian morality out from under one's feet? I hope Nietzsche was wrong, but I fear he may be right.
Fuck Nietzsche. I don't think so-called Christian morality is anything to be proud of. The further that we can get from Christian morality, that which is given in the pages of the Bible, the better off we're going to be, because Christianity is shit. Now, I know Christians don't think so, but the Christians, demonstrably, they just aren't that bright, are they? I don't particularly care what they think, do you?
In my next video, I want to take up that question. Will the decline in Christian belief lead to the end of Christian morality?
Hopefully, because a lot of so-called Christian morality is really, really bad. You don't need Christianity to have decent morals. Although, let's be honest, getting rid of Christianity probably gets rid of a lot of the really bad ideas that come along with it. The actual decent ideas, things that they didn't get from their stupid book in the first place, a lot of that is fine. Half of the decent stuff in the Bible, decent in big air quotes, they didn't get from their imaginary friend in the first place, but from other cultures that existed long before it was written. Christianity isn't actually Christian in a lot of ways. It's an accumulation of ideas that stretch back for thousands of years that the early Christians just laid claim to and said, well, because we said so. But that's not how this works, and hopefully more and more people are starting to figure that out as they flood out of the churches, and one would hope, into rationality and skepticism. Sadly, we know that's not exactly the case, and the fight will continue on, even once Christianity and other idiotic world religions are long gone. The problem isn't just Christianity. It isn't just religion. It's human stupidity. And hopefully one day, we'll get that one licked too.